Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Zevachim daf chavav. Zevachim. Hold on, let me press record here. Oh, I'm already recording. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Zevachim daf chavav. Zevachim 26. Today's daf yomi is dedicated for Shemir for Chayalim, Ratzal for the Shvayim, and the Yeshua for Am Yisrael and this Ace Tzara. We're going to start on the bottom of Chaf Hey Amud Beis, the bottom of 25b, on the bottom line of the page. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Ki bifnim viragla b'chutz. So we know that the animal is supposed to be in a specific place when the korban is brought. So the animal has to be inside the courtyard when it is slaughtered. So let's say the animal is inside the courtyard, but its legs are outside. And now the concern is going to be that the blood, which needs to be conveyed or received in a basin, in the Mazrek, as part of the Kabbalah, that will have come from outside. So that's why the Gemara says, that at first you cut off the legs of the animal, and we'll see what that means, and then you slaughtered it, it would be kshera. But but if you slaughtered the animal and then cut off the legs, it would be pesua, it would be disqualified. Rashi explains why, if you slaughtered it, and then cut the legs, which were outside, is it disqualified? Because from the moment you slaughtered it, the blood was disqualified because of the legs were disqualified because they were outside the courtyard, and all the bloods are intermingled, Rashi explains. And so therefore the blood would come out through the Beis HaShlita and will get mixed up with the blood of the basin and will be disqualified. So, but if it was chatach, so the Gemara says, but your first scenario on top of Chavav Amud Aleph, chatach v'achkach shachat, is keshera, that if you cut off the legs and then slaughter the animal, it's kosher. But we have a different problem. Okay, you don't have the blood, but Baal Mum Kamakrif, but you're bringing an animal that has a blemish on it, and that's no good. Ela ema, so you have to read it as chatach v'achakach kibel kshera. That first you slaughter the animal, then before you did the Kabbalah, you cut off the leg so that you did not get the blood from it, and then you receive the blood of the rest of the animal, then it's kosher. But kibel v'achakach chatach, but if you receive the blood and then you cut off the leg, it would be disqualified. So the Gemara again has a problem with this. That if you slaughter the animal, then cut off the leg and then receive the blood, it's kosher. How could that be? This is a discussion we had on yesterday's daf, that if you, after you slaughter the animal, before you receive the blood, you make a blemish in the ear that will cause a defect on it, and then you receive the blood, it's disqualified possible, because it says, as we said yesterday, it says you take from the blood of the bull, par shaya kvar, meaning to say it has to have been unblemished when you receive the blood. So Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Avimi, what we're talking about is that you don't really, Boker Tov, Jeff, you got to take the Gemara from there. They're at the end. Oh, yeah, there's one there. That's what happens when I tell people what to do. So it says that chatach be'ever ad shemagil etzem, that you don't make a blemish in the leg of the animal. You just cut the limb. You just cut the blood source off, but you didn't cut the bone. You were just chatach be'ever ad shemagil etzem. You just cut it until you reached the bone. And Rashi says that's not a blemish, and the blood will be stopped. And so therefore what happens is you slaughter the animal, you stop the blood from flowing, but you don't make a blemish, and that's going to be okay when you do the Kabbalah, because you're just getting the Kabbalah from the blood that was inside the courtyard. So the Gemara says, but wait 1 second, we have a different problem with this assumption. You're saying kibel v'achka chatach psua. So you've said that if you receive the blood, and then only after receiving the blood, it's going to be disqualified. If you kibav akachatach psua, meaning to say, the Gemara goes back to that statement that Rabbi Elazar made, that if you receive the blood and only afterwards that you cut off the limb, it's disqualified because the blood was outside of the courtyard. Well, now we have a different problem because this seems to contradict a different halacha. Shmas mina, let's learn from here. Dam hamuvla be'ivarim damu, because you're saying if you didn't cut off that blood, then we're going to say that blood which was in the limbs is going to mix with the rest of the blood, and this therefore we're going to assume that the blood that was in the limbs is considered to be blood, and so therefore you should get kares if you eat it, because if it's not blood, how would we say it's going to be disqualified for having gone out of the courtyard? But we know that the blood of the limbs is not going to be considered kares, that's not the halacha as it relates to it. So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara explains, no, you're not going to be chayev. The blood is not going to be disqualified because of the blood that's coming up from the rest of the leg, but delma mishum shamnunis, maybe because of the fat that was in that part of the leg, which is capable of being eaten, and it's considered like meat, and that it's disqualified having gone out of the courtyard. And so therefore it will get mixed up with the blood of the foot, and it will go out through the base of shlita, and it'll be disqualified because it's in the basin. It'll disqualify the basin. Well, the Gemara says, well, learn from here a different principle. Learn from here that if you have the meat of kache kalam, even there are two levels of sacrifices. There's kache kalam and kache kachim. Kache kalam is the lesser level, like generally speaking, the shlamim, and the kache kachim is the higher level. As we'll see in a moment, it has to be slaughtered only in the northern part of the courtyard, like the chatas and the ola. So let's learn from here that the meat of basar kache kalam, the lesser level, that went out of the courtyard before the sprinkling the blood, is disqualified, because here you're arguing that it's disqualified. So the Gemara says, no, we're not going to, and even though, the chiddush here is, even though that in the end it will go out, will be allowed to leave the courtyard, nevertheless, since you have not sprinkled yet, it's not time yet. And so therefore, maybe that's the teaching here. So and this is going to be a question later on in the Gemara. So the Gemara says, no, that's not what's going on here. Maybe this teaching was only said about Kache Kachim, that Dilma, when Rabbi Ami said it's the name of Rabbi Lazar, it was about Kache Kachim, the highest level. And that would be disqualified if it went out before the sprinkling, because that is never supposed to leave the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so now the Gemara challenges this idea. You're going to see that the Gemara is going to cite a brisa, and the brisa that is going to try to prove that the meat of kache kalim that went out from the courtyard before the zrika, it would actually be disqualified because it had went out. So again, what does the Gemara want to prove? That if you have the meat of kache kalim that went out of the courtyard, but even though it's eventually allowed to go out, but if it went out before the sprinkling of the blood, it would be disqualified. So the Gemara cites the brisa. What does the brisa say? Kache kachim, again, the holiest of the category of sacrifices, shchitas or mitzafon. They're supposed to be slaughtered only in the northern part of the courtyard. The kibol daman, the klisharis mitzafon, and the blood of such a carbon has to be received in the north. Amad bidaram. Let's say a person is standing in. The Kohen is, let's say, standing in the southern part of the courtyard. And he just sticks his hand into the north for shachat, and he slaughters shlitaso kshira. That would actually be okay. That would be okay. And Rashi says, we're going to learn this out because it says the shlita needs to be in the north, but the shochet doesn't. The one who receives the blood, he'll need to be completely in the north, as we'll see right now from the Brisa. Kibel, well, let's say he's standing in the south and he sticks his hand in to receive the blood, kabalaso psula, that would be disqualified. Hechnis rosho verubo, and we're studying this at home at Sukkot, and we know that when you eat in the sukkah, you have to have rosho verubo. You have to have your head and your body in the sukkah, in order for it to be a kosher sukkah, it also needs to be capable of holding rosho verubo. So hechnis rosho verubo, That's like he has the majority of his body in, and then he can receive the blood as kosher. Let's say the animal went through the death rattle, and as a result of this death rattle, it moved, it rattled out of the north and went to the south, or Daram, the Chazra, and then goes back into the north. Kashera, that we're going to say is kosher, because it's the psul of Yotze, the psul of going out of bounds, so to speak, is only if it goes outside of the courtyard completely. And so therefore, even if it didn't go back, it would still be kosher. But Rashi says this phrase, v'chazor, is lavdaf, and it's just from the rest of the price, so therefore it use it. But now we say that was kodesh kodshim, but kodesh kalim, the lesser holy sacrifices, i.e. the shlamim, the meiser, the bechor. So what do we say about these? Kodesh kalim, shchitasan bifnim. So their sacrifice, their slaughter needs to be inside the courtyard, meaning to say inside the courtyard of the temple. The kibol damim b'klisharis b'fnim, and you have to receive their blood inside the courtyard. Amad b'chutz, let's say he stands outside, v'chnis yado b'fnim, and he sticks his hand inside the courtyard. V'shachat, and he slaughters shlitaso kshera. That's okay. Kibel, if he stuck his hand in to receive the blood, kabalaso psula, that's going to be disqualified. Hichnis rosho verubo ki'ilu lo nichnas. But here in this case, if he just sticks the majority of his body in, it's as though he didn't go in. Unlike kodesh kodshim, where it'd be okay, here it's not okay. Pirchos aviyot delachutz la'azara. Let's say the animal goes to a death rattle and goes outside the courtyard, that's going to be disqualified. Psula. Shmamina. So don't we learn from here exactly not like we tried to say above? Don't we learn from here? Basar kodshim kalam sheyatzaf nezri kastam pisulim. Before we said that if the meat of the kodesh kodshim went out of the courtyard before the blood was sprinkled, it was disqualified. And then we said, no, maybe it's talking about kodesh kodshim. But we see from here proof like that, because we say basar kodesh kalam that went out before the sprinkling of the blood is disqualified. Gemara says, no, maybe what we're referring to here is Dilma, maybe we're referring to only discrete aspects of it. Maybe we're only referring to the Aliyah, the Yoseres HaKaved, the Shtei Koyos. That which we say is disqualified is only about the tail and the Korei lobe of the liver, and the two kidneys, since they have to be brought on the base, have to be brought on the mizbeach. They're the parts, and those parts have the din of kodesh kodshim, but the rest of kodesh kalim would not be disqualified. So it's not a proof. Mar says, so now since we're discussing these ideas of where you're partially in, partially out, Mar records a conversation between the father of Shmuel and Shmuel. So the father of Shmuel asked a question from Shmuel. Let's say the animal is inside the courtyard and its legs are outside the courtyard. And the question, Raj says in all these questions, is lichatchila. Can you lichatchila, even initially speaking, slaughter like that? So Shmuel says, no, you can't. Why? Shmuel says, Amoy ksiv v'aviyum Hashem. That needs to be brought to Hashem, means to say, Ache teikul ifnim. The entire korban has to be inside the courtyard. The entire animal has to be inside when it's slaughtered. Let's say toa v'shachat mahu. Let's say the animal is suspended in the air, which is not a crazy scenario because that's the way they would control the animal, by suspending it in the air, and then he slaughters it. What will be the halacha? So there he says, Amrulei kasher. Shmuel says it's kosher. So no, there Shmuel's father says ishtabash. You made a mistake. Ba'inan shlita al yerach. We need the slaughter to be next to the altar, meaning to say on the ground, veleka, and it wouldn't. Nitla v'shachat mahu. So, but here now, let's say it's not the animal that's suspended in the air, but let's say it's the shoichet, the slaughterer who's suspended in the air when he does the shlita. What would be the law? Amrulei. So Shmuel tried to say pasla. He tries to say, well, it needs to be next to the altar. That So he thought to say that it's disqualified if the shochet is slaughtered. Amrulei ishtabasha. Shmuel's father says, no, you're making a mistake. Shlita al yerach, lo shochet al yerach. The shlita needs to be next to the altar, but not the shochet. Nitla v'kibel ma. Well, let's say he's suspended in the air when he receives the blood. So Shmuel tried to say keshera. So his father says, no, Amar Ishtabasha, you made a mistake again. Ein derech sheres bekach. You can't serve. The slaughter is not considered a service, but the receiving of the blood is considered a service, and it's not the way to serve if you're suspended in the air. So the service needs to be on the ground. Tala v'kibel mahu. Let's say the animal was suspended. So let's say the animal was suspended. Tala v'kibel mahu. Let's say the animal was suspended and you received the blood while it was still suspended in the air. So about that, Amar, like, sure, Shmuel tried to say it's kosher. Amar ishtabashed. Tal v'kibel mahu. Amar psuli tried to say it's disqualified. Amar ishtabashed. Shlita yarach v'kabal yarach. The shlita needs to be next to it, but not the receiving of the blood. Amar Abai says all these questions that our father of Shmuel is talking to Shmuel, Bikachi Kachim Kulam Psulos, all of them would be Bikachi Kachim, they would all be disqualified. Every case would be disqualified. Bar mi v'nitla v'shachat, with the exception of the case where the shochet was suspended in the air and he slaughtered it, because that is from the pasuk. Only the animal needs to be next to the altar, but not the shochet. But by kachi kalim, kulan kasher, everything will be kosher, even if you even in that case, bar min nitla v'kiba, with the exception of where the animal was suspended in the air and you received it, because excuse me, with the exception of where the kohen was suspended in the air when he received it, because ein derech sheres bakach. That's what Abai is. So Amar Rava, Maishna Tala v'kibel b'kachi kalim. So Rava says, why in a case where you suspended the animal in the air by kachi kalim do we say it's kosher? The avir pnim kipnim dami, because we say that the airspace of the courtyard is like the courtyard itself. Well, b'kachi kachim nami avir itself on kitzafat nami. Well, we should say the same concept by kachi kachim. And we should say that if you suspended the animal in the air when you received the blood, that should be kosher. So El Rava, so therefore Rava gives a different explanation. He says, Bein b'kachi kachim, bein b'kachi kalim, ksheros. He says, Rava says, both, whether it is the kachi kachim or the kachi kalim, that in all these cases it's kosher, with the exception of bar min v'tala v'shachat, except the case where you took the animal and you suspended it in the air, the kachi kachim, it's disqualified because it needs to be next to the altar. But nitla v'kibel, and also in the case where the shochet was suspended in the air when he received the blood, bein b'kachi kachim, bein b'kachi kalim, it will be disqualified because ein derech sheres bekach. So it's not the service. So Bamine Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Zera the following question: Hu bifnim v'tzitziso b'chutz. Let's say he's inside, but somehow has a strand of hair. I don't know what type of hair. Maybe it's because his hair was supposed to be short, but somehow or other his hair was jutting out. Mao, what will be the law? Will that be disqualifying? Can you lose by a hair? So Amrulay, so Rabbi Zera says, Lav Amres v'aviyam Hashem. Then we cite the pasuk, the entire person needs to be inside. And so it's not just the majority, you need to have everything. So you can't shecht it until everybody's inside. And hachinami also with respect to bevom ol moed, ol moed. So just like you need the entire animal in, then also until the entire Kohen is inside. This is the position of Rashi and Tosfos, who says that this is all lechatchila, but b'diavad will be okay. And also the Kohen, that he needs to be entirely in the courtyard, is lechatchila. But the Rambam rules not like that. Rambam says if it's not completely in, it's disqualified even b'diavad. So okay, so now we come to just one idea I thought of was that why do we say that if the Kohen is suspended in the air when he receives the blood, it's disqualified because ein derech sheres bekach. That's not the way we serve, and that's not the way that's not service. Service has to be standing on the ground. And so too, this is a big mussar for our lives when it comes to religious service of Hashem. We need to be grounded. We can't be flying in the air. We need to be firmly grounded in our service and our approach to faith. Says the Mishnah, Nasnu al gabe kevesh shelo keneged hayesod. Let's say somebody puts the blood in the wrong place. He doesn't put it on the mizbeach, but he puts it on the ramp of the altar, and he doesn't put it opposite. He puts it on the ramp, or he puts it on the altar, but not opposite the foundation where he's supposed to do it. And we know that, for example, the olah needs the blood opposite the yesod, which is the foundation of the altar. So he put it in the wrong place. Or he put the parts that were supposed to be below, we put them above. And we'll learn all of these halachos. So in all these cases, he puts the blood in the wrong places. It's all going to be disqualified. And each korban has a specific place where the blood is supposed to go. If he doesn't put it in the right place, it's disqualified, but he doesn't get kares for if he eats that korban where the blood was put in the wrong place, he doesn't get kares if he eats from the flesh. So just to remind us, the obligation for kares comes if you eat from an animal that was disqualified because you have the wrong thought when you slaughter it about the sprinkling of the blood, and you intend to eat the sprinkled blood after the proper time, and that's called pigul. So our mission is not talking about that. So why would we think that you're even chayav kares? So we're going to have to get into that. So the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel, when it said pasol the eno chayav kares, when it says you're disqualified, when our Mishnah says that you're disqualified, but you're not liable for kares, so that's what the Mishnah said. In all these cases, if you put the blood in the wrong places, your pasol means to say the meat is pasol. Pasol basar, the meat is pasol. But the owners do receive atonement of obalim nischapro. Even though you put the blood in the wrong place, the owners achieve atonement. My time. What's the reason why the owners achieve atonement, even though the blood was placed in the wrong place? It says in the pasuk that I gave you this blood to you on the altar to serve as an atonement. Even though you can't eat the meat, but once the blood reaches the altar, the owners have achieved atonement. So Gemara says, if that's the case, basar nami, if that's the case, that if you can, no matter where you put it on the altar, even if you didn't put it in the right place, the certain karbanos need to be below the chota sikra, and certain ones need to be on all four corners, certain ones need to be above. So we're going to go through all of those halachos. Nevertheless, he says, once it reaches the altar, the owners achieve atonement. If that's the case, basar nami. If that's the case, then why can't you eat the meat? That's the basic question. Basar nami. So amakra l'chaper. No, it's based upon the fact that the verse says l'chaper l'kapara nasati v'lo l'davracha. I gave you this blood as an atonement, but not for anything else. So now the Gemara says, so we see that Shmuel has said that if you put the blood in the wrong place, the meat is disqualified, but you've fulfilled your obligation to achieve atonement. Alma kasavar shalobim komom kim komodami. We see from here that Shmuel has given us the teaching that even though you put the blood in the wrong place, it's as though you put it in the right place. But we have a problem because Tanat v'idach pirkun, we learned in the other chapter. There's a third time in our track that we're already referring to another chapter. Nisano. Now let's say the blood was placed in the improper place, ala kevesh, or shalo keneged hayesod, or nasa nasan nisan l'mata l'mala v'asin nisan l'mala l'mata v'asin nisan b'fnim b'chutz v'sinam b'chutz b'fnim. Then, if you put the blood in all the wrong places, im yesh dam hanefesh, if you still have dam hanefesh, yachzor says if there's still more blood, yachzor akasher v'yikabel. Let's look at the Rashi. Yachzor kohen akasher l'kabala. A kohen who is kosher should go back to receive the blood. V'yikabel kedei matan min habehima, and he should receive enough blood. He should receive enough blood from the animal, he should and he should go back and put it in its place. And the assumption is that until the ad hashta bekohen kosher nami iri, the assumption of the Gemara at this point is that the Mishnah is referring to a kosher kohen until now. And when it says hakosher, that was inexact, kedei nasba, meaning it was inexact. So meaning to say that he should go back and receive the blood again if he did it wrong.
What remind me what we discussed yesterday when we said it had to be blood?
So we said that wasn't exact when it says all the blood, but here that means you can't take it off the floor. But also we said the Rambam says just some of the blood. You didn't need all of it. So the Gemara says and so again, what does this Mishnah say? Where are we with our discussion? That Shmuel has said that the blood, even if it's placed in the wrong place, is still kosher. And the next Mishnah says that he goes back, if you put it in the wrong place, he has to go back and do it again. And our assumption is that he has to go back and do the blood again properly. Get the blood and put it properly. If you want to say that if you put it in the wrong place, it's still kimkomodam, it's still okay. If that's your assumption, hold on. Why does he have to go back and do it? Why does he have to go back and do it again? And if we say, well, he has to go back and do it again just to allow the meat to be in, is it really possible that there be a sprinkling of the blood that would accomplish nothing about atonement, and yet it would allow the meat to be in? Meaning to say, can you have a blood that's not accomplishing anything other than allowing the blood to be, the meat to be in? That we assume that that's not the case. So therefore, Gemara says, Gemara says, yeah, if you would be correct if the person who brought the blood to sprinkle it in the wrong place was a kosher kohen, that would be the case. But what we're talking about here is the Yahweh puzzle. Now we're talking about here that when it states that he put it on the ramp in the wrong place, that it was all done by a Kohen who was disqualified. And so therefore the Zrika did nothing. That's why he has to go back with a kosher Kohen. And that's what the Mishnah said, the Yachzor HaKosher v'Yikabel, that a kosher Kohen needs to go back. It wasn't that the problem wasn't that the blood was done in the wrong place. The problem was that the Kohen who was disqualified did it. So we have to have a kosher Kohen do it. Because that was done in the wrong place, but it was done by a kosher Kohen. There's two different Mishnayos. The Mishnah that Shmuel is commenting on is talking about kosher Kohen with the wrong blood. But the Mishnah that we cited from later on is talking about a non-kosher Kohen, and therefore it's not going to Alama Beis. It's talking about a non-kosher Kohen. So the Gemara says, hold on 1 second.
It's a parallel mission.
But it's a different scenario. We assumed it was the same scenario. So the Gemara says, the Tanan, and the Gemara says, but wait, we have a problem with this. Well, I have a decoy. How could we go back and do the service again with a kosher Kohen and get the blood from the same animal? That blood should have been pushed off. Kivin Damrina, and look at Rashi. Kivin Damrina Shalobim Komo Dami. Since we say that if you do it in the wrong place, it's okay as long as it's on the altar. Kiyave Pasul, when the non-kosher Kohen brought it, Havile Zrika Psua, it will be a disqualified sprinkling. Kilu Nesano Pasul Bimkomo. It's as though the non-kosher Kohen put it in the proper place. And then all of the blood should have been disqualified. It would be called dichoy. You shouldn't be able to repair it. You can't use the rest of the blood. And how do we know this? Because we learned in the Mishnah Lama Beis, Vikulan Shekibru Chutzlasmanu. That let's say you have all those people who are disqualified who receive the blood with the intent to bring the blood after the proper time, or chutzlam kama, or after the proper place. Im yesh dam hanefesh, if there is remaining blood, yachzor kosher v'kabel, then the one who is a kosher kohen could go back and receive it properly. Meaning to say, kiblu in, that when do we say that if the disqualified person did it, the kosher one could go back and do it again? That's only if they just received it. But zarko, if the non-kosher person, the disqualified kohen sprinkled it, whoa, he can't go back. My timer, what's the reason? That once the disqualified kohen sprinkles it, then it's in the proper place, then it's pushed off forever and you can't go back. And so how can we explain that that's what this Mishnah is referring to? That is what this teaching in the other chapter is referring to. It contradicts this Mishnah. Gemara says, no. Well, the reason why you can't go back, the reason why it says Kabbalah and not Zrika doesn't mean that if he sprinkled it in the wrong point, the disqualified person sprinkled it, you can't go back and fix it. But the reason why they said Kabbalah is Mishum de Pasal b'machshava. The reason why the person who sprinkled it disqualifies it is not because he put it in the proper, is not because he put it in the proper place and that caused decoy, but because he disqualified with his improper thought. That's what our Mishnah is talking about. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, Kabbalah Nami. Also, if he had the wrong thought when he did the Kabbalah, it should also be disqualified. And also, is it really the case that somebody who's disqualified for service will really disqualify it completely if he has an improper thought during the Zrika? One of the principles of Pigul is it has to be otherwise exactly right. And we know that the person who has improper thought only disqualifies if he was kosher for avoda, and also bedavar aroy avoda, and it has to be something that was kosher part of the service, ubemakom aroy avoda, in the kosher place. So therefore, if he's disqualified, how would he disqualify this service? The Gemara says, "Lo tema zarkulo." Don't read it that if the disqualified person sprinkled it in the with the wrong thought, that he can't go back and fix it. That if he slaughtered it, disqualified person slaughtered it, you can't go back and fix it because the slaughtering it, the disqualified person could slaughter it. So Gemara says, "My kamasha." What's it teaching us? The pasal machshava, that if you slaughter the animal with the wrong intent, it's disqualified. Well, we already know that. Tanina, fikach im pasal machshava. We already learned that. So Gemara says, "Hakamashmoan to be kabbalah mi'elach or pasal machshava." Now it's teaching us that a kohen who's disqualified from once he receives once he comes to the time of Kabbalah, receiving the blood, then they no longer disqualify. My time it could be Rava, like Rava said, that it only disqualifies somebody who's capable of doing the service, and somebody who's capable of doing the service is required from Kabbalah onward. So anyway, that's today's daf. Baruch Hashem, we're going to continue with tomorrow continuing to discuss Shmuel's idea that sprinkling in an improper place on the altar is still considered a proper sprinkling. But for now, we'll stop here this discussion. Baruch Hashem, and